Mr. Jidesh, we are live right now. We can start in another couple of minutes. We have just now opened the attendees to access the webinar.
Thank you, Akshay.
Most welcome.
You can just give me a cue as to when to start and I'll be good to go.
Sure, Jidesh, I'll do that.
Give me a second. I'll just need to do some. Do we have a minute?
Just
Yes,
a minute,
please.
Vijay. Thank you. We're waiting for Miss Vijayalakshmi's video feed and then we can start. Yes, she's here. Jidesh, we can start now.
Good morning to friends from the US. Good afternoon, friends from UK and Europe, and good evening to all of you joining this webinar from India. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone here today for the second of the legal town hall series focused on the IT sector in India and how we expect the IT industry to adapt in a post-COVID world. Before I jump into the event, I want to place a heartfelt thanks to all the frontline COVID warriors who have been keeping the country safe while we are able to work within the confines of our homes. My name is Jidesh Kumar, and I'm the managing partner of Stubb and Kasiva, advocates and attorneys, and I'll be your moderator today. My background is in corporate mergers and acquisitions, information technology laws, labor and employment, and real estate. Before I introduce the panelists to you, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items and share the format in which we'll be conducting this session. The entire session will be 1 hour in duration with an extra 20 or maximum 30 minutes buffer if needed, with the first 30 to 40 minutes parked for discussion with our panel, after which I'll be throwing the floor open for questions. I'll encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A box on your screens. Once the discussion with the panelists is complete, we'll open the floor for questions for around 20 to 25, maximum 30 minutes. Please raise the hand icon on Zoom and we'll unmute your lines one by one, and you can ask your questions live. You're requested to identify yourself and stick to the questions posted. Let me now go ahead and introduce our panel here today. Moving in alphabetical order, firstly, we have Athmanandha Perumal. Athmanandha is the head legal of Sify. He's worked previously with Vodafone, Uninor, Odyssey, and Tata Teleservices. Welcome, Athmanandha. Also joining us is Jyoti Pawar. Jyoti is the Senior Vice President and Global Deputy General Counsel of Infosys Limited. Before this, she also held GC roles with Bharti Airtel, GE Money. Welcome, Jyoti. Next, we have S. Mahadevan. Mahadevan is the Executive VP, Legal Compliance and Company Secretary of Hinduja Global Solutions. Before moving into this global role with HGS, he also held leadership roles with Jubilant Life Sciences, Landmark Group, and also American Express and Hughes Software. Welcome, Mahadevan. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Rajneesh Jaswal. Rajneesh is the Senior VP and General Counsel of NestAway Technologies. Before this, Rajneesh was the head of legal at Metro Cash and Carry and Michelin Tires. He also held senior management roles with MasterCard and GE. Welcome, Rajneesh. Finally, to complete our panel today, we have Vijayalakshmi Natrajan. Vijayalakshmi is the Senior Director Legal for India and Asia Pacific region for Harman. Before this, she has held senior leadership roles with Microsoft, Fidelity Investments, HCL, and also Tata Teleservices. Welcome, Vijayalakshmi. Without any further ado, let's dive straight in and kick off this legal town hall. Employment and employment-related issues have been a major question during the COVID-19 crisis in India and world over. Loss of pay, loss of holidays, reduction of pay, reduction of holidays, layoff, and in some cases even retrenchment and termination are being discussed on an everyday basis. I first go to Jyoti. Jyoti, what are your views on this and how do you think the industry must cope and adjust with the situation of handling employees?
Yeah, I think thanks and thanks to everybody on the call. Hello, everyone. It's nice. This is my first webinar, so it's interesting, and I believe we have quite a few people dialed in, and it will be great to have an interactive session. So yeah, in terms of employees, I think the first and foremost thing is most important is employee safety and well-being, both put together. So the different situations really. We are looking at 2 or 3 or 4 different types of situations. The first one really is employee enablement. I think that's really, really important because what has happened is from an ODC sort of a setup, which is basically client specific ODC, to a remote situation, right? There is a huge shift. And in ODC, everybody knows it's basically an offshore development center where the controls are pretty much with the customer. Customer has put everything in place. There is an SOP that is being followed. There are data norms that are being followed. There are lockers, everything, and like the mobiles and every other device is kept outside. And it's a very controlled and well structured environment, right? And from there, you're suddenly moving into a space which is from home or remote. So data security controls, all of that does become important. I think we're going to cover it later. But what's even more important is the fact that how do you really enable all these employees, right? Not everybody has a laptop. How do you reach desktop to so many? And I think the IT industry has done a phenomenal job of ensuring work from home. Infosys is 93% of Infosys staff is working from home, which means they're all enabled with desktops or laptops, which is a huge, huge shift from before. So that's one impact on employee. And I think what we should do as corporates is to make sure that they're able to work, because that's itself become a question mark now. Then there is another set of employees, because of the panic that got created before the lockdown. There is a set of employees that probably went on leave in an unauthorized fashion, did not really apply for it. There was a bit of a panic around PGs and the advisories around PGs. So IT industry is a young industry, lots of young people. People just left, right? And then they reached various towns and then wanted to come back, but there was a lockdown. Similarly, there were others who, if you remember, there was Baisakhi and all these kind of festival time just before the lockdown. And people had anyway taken long weekend leaves and had gone to various places. And again, the lockdown, was announced and they couldn't come back. So there's another category where they have taken leave and they have gone. Then there's another category, which is basically work permits, people working in a global environment where they've gone to the US, they've worked, but their work permit is over, or anywhere else in the world. And there is no work permit. So, continuing their expecting employment would be illegal. Giving a salary with no employment again becomes illegal. So how can the company really help them? That becomes, and I'll just come to some of the solutions that are being thought of, but that's the other, set of employees that we see, or the issues relating to employees. The next is the bench employees, right? I mean, that's another set in the IT industry. There are thousands of employees who are on bench who reskill themselves in different manners. And as soon as a project comes up, then they go and work on that project, and they're again moved off that once the project is over, but they continue to be on the bench. There are different solutions being thought of on that also. And I think the last lot is the quarantined employee who then says, I'm quarantined as per regulation, I can't really come to work. So enablement, salaries, retrenchment, furloughs, I think these are, this is something that has become the much talked about topic. But to answer your question on what are the various things that companies are really doing, I think it differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In situations like Australia, UK, etc., where furloughs are allowed, I think that is becoming a norm. There are different permutations and combinations. Employees, I think in India, furloughs, etc., is not heard of. I know that the IT Association has made recommendations to the government to look at 2 or 3 things. One is furlough, the other is 50% of a salary. The third is expecting the government to sort of chip in and come out with some sort of a subsidy where 50% of the salary is picked up by the government, or at least the statutory requirements like PF, etc., is picked up by the government. So there are various, solutions being offered, Jidesh, really, and it's all evolving. So for example, if I take a situation of Infosys today, we are paying all our employees bench or otherwise, right? Whether it is whose work permit is expired, we're looking at a stipend which is allowed by law. So there is no situation where we are not, but there are different industries and different combinations which are going on in the market today, and we just have to wait and see how this entire situation evolves. But I think at the top of everyone's mind should be employee safety, abiding by the regulation and making sure that all the norms that are prescribed by the government are followed.
Jyoti. Rajneesh, what are your views? Are these also in consonance with Jyoti's? I'd like to what are your observations regarding this, and what are your suggestions that you'd like to give to the participants?
Right. So I don't know if many people have heard of NestAway. NestAway is sort of a startup in the home rental space. Our problems are more local, unlike Jyoti's. Jyoti's at the other end of the spectrum, fairly large corporation MNC with offices in several places. We are spread over about 10 cities in India, a little over 1,300 employees, most of them on the tech side and on the services side. So firstly, to a large extent, I agree with Jyoti, the safety of our employees is paramount. Our folks are out. Our folks are picking up properties or showing properties or servicing the properties, and they are more or less the frontliners. They are the ones who are keeping other people safe to an extent because of the services we provide. But it's tough, because of the passes not being available, we are unable to service, and a lot of folks are sitting at home. Unlike a large corporation, we are a startup. We are well funded, but again, we do depend on revenues coming in, and a lot of that has got impacted. We've been trying to be humane in how we deal with our employees. We've been trying to make sure that the bare minimum PPE and plus is available. We are trying to make sure that salaries to the extent are being paid. We are trying to make sure that folks are not let go in these trying times. But as a top line for us, safety and being humane with our employees. Of course, we've also taken the time to keep our, everybody's at home. We've launched something known as the NestAway Academy, which is our learning and development center. We launched something known as the NestAway Radio, where our entire company sort of gets together on a radio chat show. Most of our leaders speak for about 10 minutes, and it's a weekly show. We have a few songs. We've discovered a lot of in-house musicians. So these are some of the things which come when you look at employees. But overall, it is a tough environment. For now, we've been very humane, and we are cognizant that everybody is going through a tough phase. But yeah, there will be a time, and hopefully it never comes, when decisions will need to be made, and then we'll be guided by the law, what needs to be done, and so on and so forth.
Also, I think just to add to that, I think communication has become more important than ever, right? Communicating continuously with our teams, with our employees, being very transparent as to what's happening, engaging them, because there's a difference in sitting across and having a meeting and sort of engaging the way we are now. And a completely, the new normal as the term now has emerged has sort of come up, and I think people are slowly adapting, and things are just evolving. So it's a very dynamic phase, for every industry, and we'll have to just wait and see how it evolves. But the spirit is to sort of keep communication going, to keep safety at the top, and to keep abiding by the law. I think that's an important aspect.
Thanks, Jyoti. Thanks, Rajneesh. Of course, it is now important for companies to relook at their employment agreements and also try and create more managerial positions if possible to escape certain labor laws. The government, I think, must also amend and notify the 4 labor codes soon so that there is greater clarity with respect to employment laws. Well, now moving on to contracts. Force majeure clauses are being interpreted by companies. It is now crucial to approach suppliers, customers, employees, and other contracting parties with greater flexibility. Mahadevan, what steps can companies take to ensure contracts are handled well in order to keep the business on track both during and after the lockdown period?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. And I want to thank Lex Fitness for giving the opportunity to be a panelist. So I'm from ITES industry. I just wanted to share what could be the possible issues which the BPO companies are facing. So typically in a ITES, company, we have, I can just put it as 4 different kind of contracts. One is the call center services, which most of the domestic companies are doing, domestic BPO companies are doing. The second one is the back office operations, where you do a lot of work from the back office in India for US and other geos. The third one, which is a new area for many of the companies, including our company, is digital services, where a digital team is formed, where they provide digital services to many of the existing clients and the new clients. The fourth one is, of course, some of the leading BPO players. They are in KPO, which is knowledge process outsourcing. So before March 2020, the way the operations used to be conducted, because I have been working, this is probably 20 plus years in IT and ITES industry for me. So I started working with IT industry in 2000. So the way, you used to provide services to the client is a very controlled office environment, where the client contract stipulate a lot of data protection requirements. You will have to ensure that all are complied with. There are workstation rules. You cannot carry pen and pencil, and you cannot carry the mobile. And many contracts will have, PCI DSS requirements, where, some of the BPO companies, they may be taking the credit card information from the, customers. So you have to have a closed cabin, etc. That's a requirement for the PCI DSS certification. And, many contracts, the biggest loophole in the BPO industry is many contracts, they do not provide work from home option. So this is the situation prior to March 2020. So what we have seen after March 2020 is absolutely a new normal. Jidesh, probably this is the first time I've also seen. We are working for some of the top healthcare companies, and we call it in the BPO space, we call it as payers and providers. So we work for both payers and providers, and that the healthcare companies, they are very, very cautious about the personal health information. So they never allow work from home, for the healthcare back office work. So the first time I have seen that many of the clients, they are open to discuss with the companies to explore the option of, putting the employees to operate from residence. So, of course, the way it has happened is it's a two-way dialogue. So the client was also interested because they didn't want to stop the business, and the BPO company, BPO players are also interested that they cannot lose the, revenue during this period. So we have to come out with a win-win situation. So many discussions happened, and I've read from other newspaper, from the press also, that many BPO companies of, servicing US and other geos, they have been able to convince the, the US companies to shift the work to work from home. So while it is a force majeure situation, what happened in most of the companies, I can share my experience. we have signed an agreement with the employee whosoever has moved to work from home, and we tried our level best to put all the conditions in the employment, in the agreement, and we have strictly put the do's and don'ts, and we have also, cautioned that he is not supposed to misuse the facility. So we have given dongle, we have given the laptop or desktop. So what are the concerns from a BPO side? Because IT industry, Jyoti talked about the areas where Infosys has addressed. So there are certain other areas BPO companies had concerns, and so far the things are going well. So I'll tell you what are the areas: the data security and privacy, number one. Number two, how do you monitor and coach and ensure that the productivity of the employee is not fallen to the low level, so that which will create a problem from the client. So these were the testing times, and we managed to do a kind of coaching manual during this period, and the team leaders have been in touch with the agents literally on a probably 4 to 5 times on a daily basis. And the data production, of course, currently it is not 100% covered. We are relying on the employees, but most of the companies are looking at the software to see whether we can monitor the employees' activity, and which includes installing a camera in employees' premises. So all those things are being looked at. So far things are going well. So the one of the biggest advantages we had was we have companies in US. We acquired some companies which are 100% work from home. So we got the best practices from those companies, and we try to implement those practices in India to the extent possible. So we managed to address the client's concerns, and force majeure, of course, if it is a win-win situation, if the client is also agreeing that you go ahead and do the work from home, then I think then it's a win-win situation for both client and the BPO player.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jyoti. Because he covered the IT, ITES, BPO sector, I'd like to know what are your thoughts from a software development and a software IT services company. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So let's just spend 2 seconds on the force majeure clause per se, and that's what the most used, misused, misunderstood term of today. A clause which probably didn't get any attention in the past has got the maximum attention today, right? So it basically says that in the event of a natural disaster, right, neither party is liable to perform its obligations. That's the gist. And natural disaster is then called out to include floods, fires, smoke, earthquake, etc. It does not include the term pandemic, and every force majeure clause is different from the other, but everywhere, most of the time, I think 1% maybe probably including a pandemic or a quarantine, but no, 99% of the clauses do not include this, right? What also is important to understand in a force majeure clause is it says on a best effort basis, you will resume work as soon as possible. You will give a written notice. And most importantly, that your BCP DRP will kick in. Now, in a situation like this, which was so unique, with every location shut down, there was no question of BCP DRP being invoked anywhere. And at the max, the clause allows you to extend your performance obligations by 1 to 3 months. What was interesting was that the clause does not allow for termination without notice, but the number of calls or customers or negotiations the entire industry faced where the customer wanted to terminate the contract immediately, or maybe scale down the business without any notice, or did not want to pay the termination fees. Neither does the clause say that you are absolved from your payment obligations for the work that has already been done. But we've seen different sorts of combinations where, working with the customer became really important to make the customer understand the clause, obligations, and also at the same time be very open to working with them in a very flexible manner to see how best we could help them to continue and not have business losses on their side or our side. So it's been very unique, interesting. I think the contracts team has been, at one time when this whole thing hit us, it was in the month of March, right? So there were disclosures happening at one side because it was year end, and then there was also the other side where there was a complete contrast where you're revisiting contracts which you've executed in the past. The other impact on the contract is with insurance. Even insurance does not cover COVID. And there are legislative changes happening. There are some 7 legislative changes expected in the US, where companies, restaurant companies, hotels, etc., have filed cases, class action suits against insurance companies, and there's that whole battle going on, in the court of litigations. And what the companies are asking for is a declaratory judgment, where they say that we're upfront stating that they will not be able to comply with the obligations. And of course, the insurance company have a valid, reason as per their contract, which says that COVID is not included, and we only cover what is covered, what is included in the policy. So this is this is one part of it. The other thing that we are seeing is consent, like Mahadevan mentioned. So that's become very interesting because every contract says that you will firstly take a written consent if you want to do any amendment to the contract. So we actually had a situation where we are in 40, 45, 50 plus countries. So we had to look at email enforceability of contracts across various jurisdictions. So really did that entire research and then said, all right, we can do this, A, B, and C to alter that situation with consent of the customer on email, and then allow working from home. So that became extremely important. Then termination clauses are being looked at. Even this whole location of services, right? BCP DRP will now become annexures to the main contract, right? Because location itself is going to be work from home. Compliance to clauses has to become an either party. It cannot be a one-sided clause by any stretch. Preferred vendor is the other thing that's going to come out, because if a company shows signs of moving towards a negative financial state, then we would like to do 2 things. Of course, be the preferred vendor there, and I say we for the IT industry, really, that would be one. And even look at how we can discount our receivables, right? So that clause will also become included in the contract. So contracts are going to see a massive change, and we are everybody's putting things together to see how best we can negotiate. Even the fallback positions have to be renegotiated. Our entire contract playbook will have to be actually relooked at, and that's what we are doing today.
Thank you, Jyoti. That was indeed very detailed. Businesses will also have to deal with practical issues around health and safety, data protection, and also strength of the employee's own internet connectivity at home. I think contact tracing and other health protection measures would also involve processing of sensitive personal information, health data being one. Athmanandha, what are some of the privacy and data security practices and procedures that companies must put in place to ensure that they are in compliance with laws?
Thank you, Jidesh, Lex Witness, and FICCI for bringing us together to share our thoughts. Last few years, when every natural calamity kept provoking my thoughts, as the calamity faded away, so was my thoughts and actions. But COVID-19 was a little different, which has really changed the way my life moved on. Thanks to the digitalization, my life for a change has become much more structured and simpler. So when there is a necessity, there is a solution. I always dreamt of having all the agreements signed digitally. So we used to print documents, agreements, contracts, and stacked up, searching for spaces. Now we've been doing contracts digitally for last couple of months, hundreds of them, using DocuSign and then signing them. But it doesn't come that simple. there is always a high probability of risk associated during this natural calamities. We scramble to put things to meet the requirements. Some of them, what I could observe during this COVID-19 was companies giving them access to private laptops because everything was in the last minute, rushing of offices, looking for systems. Then systems were loaded with data. Who you have time to verify whether what data is stored in the system, and some of them were asking for remote access because we were giving both providing both essential and non-essential services, and essential service had to run. Then we had to keep moving. Then some of requests were flowing for private emails and sharing of data. If resource exiting the organization, what will happen to the data with the employee? How do we retrieve those systems with the employees leaving the organization during this particular situation? Then there were a lot of board meetings and high-level discussions using this online medium, which was also all over the paper. Whether these data are secure enough for these discussions. Most of the agreements which I've been executing were using digital signature. How safe is this to upload those documents? Some of them are very, very confidential and high stake contracts. And then when we keep moving, so is it safe to use hotspots, mobile hotspots to download, access the high value documents? These are the gray areas which were there, but some of the immediate actions which were taken, I've seen some of the organizations where particularly with associates, where companies were moving forward, taking declaration that they will not use the system for the personal uses except for the purpose which it was given. So if private laptops are permitted to use, the antivirus and necessary applications were loaded, and the decision was taken to allow only key resources to access the sensitive data. Not only that, to keep engaging with employees, so there was weekly communication, creating awareness about the security breaches and compliances. When documents were downloaded and it was scanned through app, then the security teams were also kept on toes for monitoring whatever was happening on the mails. So digitalization will be the life going forward. I felt a lot more comfortable using DocuSign for signing the agreements, but it was more comfortable for signing the overseas contracts. When it came to Indian contracts, there was always a challenge on the stamping. So we are already exploring with some of the corporations, how do we get the e-stamped attached with the digitally signed agreements. I feel with respect to security, instead of printing the agreement and maintaining the safekeeping, I feel the digitally signed agreement is a lot more easier to maintain. And then when you have the required applications and security applications in the system, I think it will be a lot more easier and to have control.
Sure. Thank you, Athmanandha. Vijayalakshmi, what are your views regarding this? You're on mute, Vijayalakshmi. I think you're on mute. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. So, I mean, with this current situation, like even now working under the lockdown, and then, once we reopen, it's going to be few people working from home, few people working from office. And then, we need to have these kind of security, data transfer, all that is going to be a kind of a very interesting to see how we are going to manage it. So I want to talk particularly about the recurrent issue of, concern around Arogya Setu, because when we are going to reopen, there are a lot of questions and concerns about, you would have been aware, like, even at our industry level, there is a lot of lobbying going on, in a sense that, how do we interpret? So the government has recently notified that, right, the head of an organization is responsible that 100% coverage of Arogya Setu for all its employees. So there are a lot of questions from the employees also from a privacy point of view. So some of them are not comfortable saying that, this is a personal information. I don't know how will it be used and all that. So what I feel is, and as a kind of a general counsel, it's our responsibility to kind of always weigh in when it is a question of, say, a privacy versus a public health issue. So obviously, right, the public interest would prevail, and no right is absolute in that sense. So everything is kind of relative. So people should understand that. And as an organization, when we are reopening, we would also make it mandatory for everyone, employees, everyone, right? Outsourced staffs, even housekeeping force, everyone should have a Arogya Setu app, and then it should be running. The other part and the practical difficulty with that is when we talk about IT employees or anybody working in an engineering kind of a setup, it's given that, they will be using a smartphone. But how is about manufacturing, or even in our own offices, the kind of housekeeping staff or security folks? So they may not even have a smartphone. So we still have the discussion going on with the government. Hope that there should be some clarification around it. Otherwise, the other options some of the organizations I know of as also looking at is some kind of a declaration where you ask the similar questions, what is in the Arogya Setu app, and then, reflect it. Just that, it may not have a location tracking or any of it. So what happens is, it is just based on a purely an individual's perspective. So it may not be an exact substitute, but then, as a time, for a time being, or, people who do not have access, kind of that seem to be a workable solution. And also what I understand, government is also working with telcos to see that, if this can be made part of a feature phone as well, so that, the coverage would be pretty much broader and everybody would be able to download and use it.
Sure. Thank you, Vijayalakshmi. Moving forward, and very quickly, because we all, I think we're about, we've covered about 70% of our time now. So another big challenge is the fixed costs relating to real estate leases. Companies are now revising or revisiting the lease contracts to try and get some relief from lessors. Companies are also trying to get rental waivers wherever possible. Rajneesh, since you are somebody who have leased a lot of properties, what are your views concerning real estate leases, and what are the steps that the companies must adopt to get some relief from lessors?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clearly.
No, so just a couple of things before I answer that question. NestAway deals in the residential home rental space. So that's one part, and that is really our business. We of course have our own offices on the commercial side. We have offices in sort of 13 cities across India. Purely on, and we lease out most of these office spaces. Our landlords have been actually very helpful to us. We've got waivers in most of the cities that we operate on, and these are on the commercial leases that we use for our properties. We also have about 40 smaller properties. We got pods. So these are apart from the offices. These are our retail shops. And we really have had to cut some of these down because there is really no footfall. And we worked, while we've not invoked the force majeure conditions, we worked with our landlords to sort of revise the rents or go on to a revenue share business. I think more like malls, I think that's where it's going to go, where you have a shop which is going to earn you a business. You will probably end up being in the revenue share space of things. And very especially for our pods, which are our retail shops where landlords or tenants could walk in. So though I sense that the era of fixed rents, the era of high rents are gone. We are reading news of IT companies saying work from home. Surely, for us as well, I can say that we will be reducing our office footprint. We've discovered we can work from home. We can operate from home as well. For our shops, which are more out, I think we'll move to a revenue share arrangement with some of our landlords. Quick word about the residential space, which is our main part of our business. I think rentals are going to fall as well. Though you know, with mass migration, people going back homes, for some time, I think that market is going to be down. But again, with the economic activity will come back, if not in 3 months or 4 months or 5. So home rentals, I think, will go up at some point in time.
Sure. Thank you, Rajneesh. Mahadevan, what are your views regarding this?
I've seen, I've heard some good news from Rajneesh, so I'm getting some inspiration from his, you know, the encouraging news. So I, you know, in the ITES space, you know, we rent out most of the facilities, and you know, while we are always careful while drafting the force majeure clause, the first and foremost, in my view, is to look at the force majeure clause and see what is the best possible option to see that, you know, we can address the concern with the landlord. Typically, you know, if you look at it in most of the contracts, so while I work for both the retail as well as ITES companies, in retail, of course, it's a different take. Those specifically include the clause that if there is no revenue or if the shop is shut, etc., there will be a temporary suspension of rent. So it's always there in the, you know, retail contracts. So I handled many contracts when I was in a retail company. So coming to ITES, so typically, you know, in most of the contracts, what we have seen is, you know, either it will be causes beyond the reasonable control of the parties, or it could be fire, tempest, or earthquake, mob or violence, or terrorist act. An interesting point is acts of God, or it could be strike, lockout. And again, another interesting point is political interference or political fallout. So these are some of the you know, causes which we generally see in the force majeure clause in most of the commercial leases. And epidemic is something rare. And incidentally, in one of our contracts, we included epidemic also. So that's, I don't know, but it's not very, it's not regularly included, epidemic or any act under the disaster management. And again, coming back to the another issue, what could be the consequences of the force majeure if any of the, you know, the force majeure events happen? Typically, either the licensed premises or leased premises are not in a position to be occupied, or part of the premises you're not able to occupy, or we had a situation where there was some problem with the local authorities. They came and sealed the building for some time. So that is another situation. Or the building is such that it is rendered as substantially unfit to occupy. So typically these are the you know, consequences you see in most of the force majeure. Now, in most, I think this is the problem which is faced by almost all real estate, you know, all ITES and IT companies. And I know that this is a most heated topic in the corporate, in all the cities, because whenever I talk to another GC, the same problem is being discussed. So I think, in, you know, the way I look at it is, like Rajneesh touched upon, we have to talk to the landlord, and it has to be a very, you know, we have to say that this is a force majeure situation, and it is impacting both landlord as well as the company, and the company has been severely impacted. Some of the landlords, you know, they take a view that, see, the building is absolutely, you know, ready to occupy, you know, is available. And they have gone to the extent that, you know, some of the IT folks are coming and they are checking the server. Your server is located here, and the data, complete, you know, your office data, everything is stored here, and you are accessing your client client data through this server. So literally, if you look at it, so we are ready and you are operating. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a negotiation, commercial negotiation between the landlord and the tenant. And at the same time, I just wanted to say that, it is, you have to somehow, drive the point that it is frustration of the lease agreements, the frustration of the contract, and you are not in a position to occupy the premises with complete capacity. And, we request for a suspension of rent for the period of the lockdown. So that's the point we have to drive. And the cautions we have to keep in mind is it should be led by the admin team. And we have to provide all the support. The legal team should provide all the support to the admin team, because the admin team is in the best position to negotiate with the landlord, because they maintain the relationship with the landlord. So the relationship should be kept intact. It should not be spoiled. At the same time, you have to drive the point that, this is a absolutely unprecedented situation, and we have to come to a mutual agreement. And they have to pass on some rent waiver, so that we are in a position to start the operations with some benefit. So at the end of the day, in my view, it's a mutual understanding between the landlord and the tenant, and it should be primarily driven by the admin. So we can only support, and every contract is different. So the general counsels and legal counsels have to review the contract wording, the force majeure wording, very, very carefully before starting the negotiation with the landlord.
Sure. Thank you for your observations. I completely agree with you that this is the time to negotiate with lessors, and also have a game plan to negotiate. Like you rightly said, more than purely a legal negotiation, it should be a commercial legal negotiation, and that will succeed. Clearly there clearly is no one rule that fits all. So you may also need to train your admin and facilities team, them being the first point of contact with the lessors on how to develop a negotiation strategy to achieve reasonable success. I also feel that this is opportune time to develop some new legal principles. For example, instead of frustration, probably develop a new concept of temporary frustration. There are also some established legal principles, like, for example, the doctrine of suspension, doctrine of probability, doctrine of impossibility. So these could also be tried during negotiations. I also feel that by using these new principles, we could achieve some success. Moving now to the last agenda for the panel discussion, before we head to the Q&A session. Since the lockdown is slowly being lifted with, of course, certain restrictions, what are the checks and balances that companies must place for return to work? Vijayalakshmi, what are your suggestions on this?
From a services side to a technology side, as well as the manufacturing side. So, the primary concern for every organization currently is on the safety and well-being of an employees. So there is always, so I'll not go into the details of it. There are a lot of these health-related and safety-related regulations, including, providing masks to everything. So which every organization is taking care. So one another interesting part is, like, you also have a very different kind of working style, right? People working remotely, and a few people going to office and having access to, lab and R&D and managing all of it. And that's something very, very different. And also, it's not uniform across the whole kind of, when we talk about relaxation of a lockdown or reopening of a place, it's more like even in US, right? It's doing state by state. So that's another thing, like an organization like us, which we have a global presence, it's a very, very, very dynamic situation, because, half the world is not working, and then, some are like, starting, and some are really up and running. So how you need to manage all of it, see how we can leverage that, the kind of places that is working. So specific to this India kind of a context, I would say, like, this also, again, each state has mandated, like, for instance, in Bangalore, the government said no passes are required, but in Maharashtra, they said you need passes. So even the basics, right? So we need to be very, very attentive to the details. Of course, as lawyers, we are, but now I think we need to be even more, and to see that, each and every regulation, and see, like, what is that, and we just want to follow it to the T. So beyond the safe, the hygiene point of view, next is something which is also the cost. Because it's going to increase the cost of doing the business exponentially, right? The kind of, suppose if you are doing a transport your employees, going forward, you can only accommodate 1/4 or 1/5 of them in that. So looking at that kind of, right, that's an example. Or even within the real estate office space, right? I don't know when the 100% of the employees could go to office. It's going to be to 30%, 40%. So the cost of the whole, airlines and all, it's a different issue. But even for our kind of a tech side, the cost is going to be so high. So as lawyers, somewhere, we also need to chip and work with the management and see how we can be creative in optimizing the cost as well. And the third and the interesting one I want to touch upon is the one positive outcome of this whole thing is the awareness about digital, right? Now, especially mostly, right, even for a contracts, right? Most of the companies, even I've seen right now, though we use all the digital platform, many of us will still say that, no, we are comfortable signing on paper, and then we need the two sets of originals and kind of things. So now the kind of digitalization happening, even the government approvals now, if you see, most of it are online, and I'm sure that would continue going forward as well, which is, I think, kind of a very positive thing. And it will also help, of course, there will be a lot of these data concerns and all that, but from a positive side, it's much, much easier, right? Storage to retrieval to, and also the record keeping becomes far more easier and far more manageable. I'm sure that's something where we are heading to, like most of the organization as a nation, I would say, from a regulatory policy making point of view as well. The kind of digital adaptation has been amazing. So I'm sure that would speeden up the things as well.
Sure. Thank you, Vijayalakshmi. Atmananda, quickly, maybe in a minute or two, what are your views on this?
Okay. Thanks, Jidesh. As the notification and issues are getting tested, I think, and with the differing views and coming opinions flowing out, I think it is important now to closely monitor all the legal developments. Then secondly, I think the collective and cautious steps will also be more appropriate. As we see more and more labor forums becoming very active. We have already seen that happening in one of the IT majors. Some of the issues which I foresee, which can and which is already there, force majeure and doctrine of frustration, which are very, very generously used, will get tested. So what communication here is very, very critical here, because people don't consider the time taken for mobilization and deployment, not only apart from the lockdown period where force majeures are invoked. We can also anticipate a lot of cancellation of orders for which work in progress is there. And then the other challenge could be lock-in period on an unviable contract. A lot of things change in the coming days. Companies may choose to terminate the unviable contracts. We can be either side, government contracts without exit clause, human resources falling out on account of closure or reduction of unviable business operation, expensive offshore litigation arising out of contractual obligation and data breach, new ordinance on IBC, which will delay the recoveries. All these are some of the issues which can come up immediately after the normalizes. There's a possibility that all these issues could hit us at the same time, but how do we and what do we do to handle the situation are very, very crucial. Some of the things what we can do is we can closely monitor, because most of the issues are already before Supreme Court and various forums. So in the coming weeks, we can see some of the observation coming out. We are already seeing notifications from UP and MP relaxing labor laws. So these are things, it's too early. We can see a lot of actions coming out, notifications coming out in the coming weeks. So it's important. We don't fall for the emotions, and I think we should closely monitor and then make a structured engagement or structured approach to each of the cases instead of applying the principle uniformly.
Thank you, Atmanand. I also personally feel that this is probably the one time after India got independence that law is being interpreted so heavily, especially the MHA guidelines, the 3 lines. I don't know any company in India which has not tried interpreting it. So I also feel that there's going to be a lot of discussion around public policy, because I think companies and countries are going to get very nationalistic in order to protect their own employees and their ecosystem. So that could also be another argument that could come about after the interpretations end. All of those were very useful observations, and I think everyone here has benefited from this discussion.
Now, we have a live question request, if I can take that.
Sure. Why don't you just take that, and then probably we'll go to the town hall. Yeah.
Ms. Bhargavi, can you please ask your question? Ms. Bhargavi, can you please ask your question?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. One of my friends who is running a startup firm, she has entered into a 6 months contract in a co-working space, which is effective from Jan 2020 to June 2020. And she couldn't use this co-working space for the period of 2 months, that is April and May, and for which the company has proposed to waive 50% rental amount during the period. And also they were forcing her to extend the agreement for the 3 months period. And further they were saying that, you cannot exercise force majeure condition, which is there in the agreement. That is only in favor of them. So how far it is justifiable, in forcing her to extend the contract for further period?
You didn't tell us what this contract was for. Was it for occupation?
It is just a rental space, sir.
Co-working.
Yeah, co-working space.
Jyoti, do you want to take up this question?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually a commercial negotiations. If you go by the contract, I think every rental contract will have clauses that, limit your ability to exit. So as far as the landlord is concerned, if the property is not damaged and he's made it usable.
And there is no, sorry for the interruption. Here it is only just a pay and use type.
I understand. It's a co-working arrangement. I understand that. But I'm saying if you look at it legally, obviously, the landlord is going to press for sort of abiding by the contract, and all contracts are skewed in the favor of the landlord. But this is a commercial negotiation. I don't think it's going to be about an individual. It's really going to be about what that co-working space takes as a call for all its members and not just one individual. So it's going to be a sort of a commercial call that will be taken, and I think any individual who's got a desk in a co-working space should definitely keep pursuing the negotiation. But it's a purely commercial negotiation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jyoti. Jidesh, you can take over for the rest of the questions. We have a few questions that we received in the Q&A box if you want to address that, or we can accordingly conclude the webinar.
So, Jidesh?
Yes.
Yeah, I have seen some questions relating to installing camera or CCTV in the, residence of the employee.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to address, I think, 3-4 questions. And I think one of the questions I saw is it an invasion of privacy? So I just wanted to clarify that this is an emerging area for India. Okay, so I don't think any IT company has publicly stated that I'm going to have 25% or 30% of the employees working from home. So every company is evolving, and this is a new norm. But I have to share some global practices. So we have companies in both in US and Canada. Employees are working from home permanently. It is a business model we have, and there's a company which we have acquired where all the employees except the admin employees, the complete business, the operations, they are operating from residence. They never come to, there is no office. So there are specific provisions. There are specific provisions in the agreement which you have signed, both employment contract and a separate contract which you have signed with the employee, which will enable us to monitor the activities of the employee. And this includes installing a camera, because only through the camera we will be able to coach, monitor, and help and support the employee in terms of providing services. At times what happens is you have a problem in the specific activities if they are providing services. So the camera will enable. So the employee will give their consent for installing the camera. So this will be either it will be inbuilt in the laptop or it will be done as a separate attachment. But this is absolutely permitted in US and Canada. And this is how the work from home model is operating in US and Canada. There are many companies I know, they are operating only from, only through employees operating from residence. So this is something, a well-known concept in, West. So we have to see that the law changes, and we have to, I have to clarify that this camera will be used only when he switches on the desktop. It will not be monitoring his private activities, during, when he's not working. So it will be only switched on when he starts the desktop and when he starts working and providing services to the company.
Sure. There are some very basic questions, but still, there's one addressed to Jyoti particularly. How is, how is Infosys managing to get office laptops from employees who have resigned during this lockdown period? And if these employees are there in their hometown. So Jyoti, I don't know whether you want to respond to this, because I know you're not here as a spokesperson of Infosys, so I leave it to you. Can
I give a generic response? It's not about what Infosys is doing, but about the IT industry.
Absolutely, that would be useful. Yes.
But I don't think the focus is about procuring laptops, because that's a very that's a very negative energy at the moment. I think it's more about getting the laptops to the employees and not about recovering laptops from employees who have left. I think also there's a very robust system in place, because of the lockdown. If someone has resigned, you can't collect the laptop. I think that's okay. The percentage will be so much smaller than the larger task that the industry has to do of procuring and enabling work from home. So, that's how I would, hopefully I've addressed the question.
Sure. There's one question also for Rajneesh. Rajneesh, this is from Amarnath Shukla. Yep. He states that should there be any clause or language in the rent agreements to safeguard the tenant in situations like COVID, landlords may force the tenant to pay rent in such times. Has your company taken any steps to ensure that landlord does not force tenants to pay rent in lockdown period if they're using or even not using the rental property?
Right. No, it's an interesting question. We face that every day. I hope I'm not on mute. So NestAway acts as sort of the intermediary between the landlord and the tenant. We have about 10,000 plus landlords on our network. We have about 50,000 odd tenants on our network. and we sort of act as the intermediary between them. I mean, very interesting fact, which we always knew, but I think came to fore very starkly for us. A number of our landlords are retired folks. A number of our landlords are dependent on the income, that the rental income that they receive from their properties for their livelihood as well. So while we are stuck in a dilemma, at one hand you have a landlord saying, "Look, I need the money for medicines," and how do you answer somebody like that? And on the other hand, you have tenants saying, "Look, I am not being paid for 1 month or 2 months," and so on and so forth. And it's a very tight balancing act for us, especially because we are the intermediary. The landlords expect us to pay them no matter what, and the tenants expect us not to collect the rent. And at times, I know I've got tagged on social media for being heartless and shameless and trying to collect rent. Be that as it may, I think we have a business to run. Running businesses involves maintaining stakeholder relationships very well. We've done several things to the extent we can, and these are unsolvable problems. I can't tell a landlord, "I don't have money, I will not pay you, and I will invoke force majeure," and which is a retired person, and I'm running into 6 other issues. Or I can't tell a tenant, "Look, you've not been paid, please pay up." I think we've tried to work around the problem, trying to help as many people as possible. On the landlord side, we've come up with something we call the super fund, available to some of our landlords who've been with us for the last 2 years, satisfy a certain criteria. We are giving them advance rent for about month and a half, which is of course recoverable. It's kind of us. It's a show of gratitude to them. Similarly, on the tenant side, very clearly we are not evicting our tenants, and at some point from the tenant side as well, you need to separate the truth from the half truth. Has everybody lost their jobs? Really? If you could give me something, if somebody could give me a proof that they've lost their job or there any special circumstance, we try and pass it on to the landlords and try to get some form of approval from the landlords for a rent waiver. And surprisingly, many landlords have come back and have said, "Look, I will waive off quarter of the rent or half of the rent." We've had about 200 actually more than that, about 400 landlords across India who said complete waiver of rent. A larger number than that which says partial waiver of rent. So, again, to answer the question, is NestAway going to pay from its pocket? Yes, to the extent that we are not levying late payment charges, to the extent that we are not going to evict folks. Clearly, I mean, these are hard times and everybody's got to survive. So we will not be evicting folks. We will not be adding any late payment charges or anything else. But ultimately, we will enable discussions between landlords and tenants. And to the extent possible, we will try to be humane. We will make sure that business runs as usual for landlords, tenants, as well as us.
Sure. One other question is again for the IT and ITES folks. Due to GDPR obligations, all European customers are worried how their personal data will be handled if delivery folks work from home. Most of them want their DPA to be modified, wherein the company has capped liability for DATS and security breach. So, which one of you would like to take this up?
So I can give a generic answer, but to clarify, we don't work for Euro from India. We work only from our UK operations. But my understanding is this work from home. We have to understand almost all clients have given a temporary relief. It is not a permanent solution. So the relief, whatever consent they have given, when we invoke the force majeure clause, it should include the possible security issues or any liabilities arising out of the GDPR provisions. So this is one area where it's a risk which both the company as well as the client have to look at. There is no solution currently, but yes, I think if the company wants to continue with the work from home after the lockdown, then definitely I think the contract will have to undergo change as far as GDPR provisions are concerned, because there will be a much higher liability cap, which will be insisted by the European company if the employees are operating from residence after the lockdown.
Sure.
So
Thank
one
you.
more thing I want to add here, Jidesh, is like work from home is not that you're working on your home network, right? You are connecting to the customer network, and you are either connecting directly or through Citrix, any other methodology that the organization may have. So to that extent, the controls that applied continue to apply, right? And there are firewalls. I mean, every IT company and in the CISO of that company has made sure that there are proper firewalls. There is no copying, pasting, all of the usual printing, all of those things, all of that is disabled, right? So now, can an employee take a picture and photograph? That was possible even, otherwise, whether you were on premises, ODC or home. If an employee wants to do something like that, that's possible in any environment, and that's a separate discussion completely. But otherwise, I mean, it's been what, 45 days, 50 days, and data is definitely secured through various methodologies that is provided by the IT sector, the IT department.
Jidesh, I just want to add an interesting development in Jamaica. Jidesh,
Yes.
you able to hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Jamaica has passed a law about 2-3 weeks back, specifically for the BPO. If any of the employees who are operating from residence, if they misuse the controls, like they are taking the picture through the mobile, and they will if they start misusing it, it is a criminal offense, and they'll be charged. They'll be charged accordingly.
Okay.
So it's a criminal offense.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah, and before I conclude this event, I wanted to point out that there are about 40 odd unanswered questions, and these will be taken up offline, and we'll reach out to you with a response in the next couple of days. I'd like to conclude this webinar with a note of thanks to our team at Stubb and Kasiva and Lex Witness for setting up this platform, and also to FICCI, who have permitted us to collate the observations of the IT industry. I also want to thank you for being an excellent audience. Last but not the least, I also want to thank all our family members who have let us participate in this webinar without disturbance. Good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Jidesh.
Thank you so much, Jidesh. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.